students, how are you all? Welcome to Ask IITians, or should I say, welcome back to the session. So, if you remember that in the last session, what we have discussed, like we were discussing about the water, and in that session, we have seen that the water can exist, that we have seen this thing that water can exist in the three states of three physical state, that is the solid, liquid, and gases, and all of these states are convertible into each other. And then what we have seen, student, that we have seen that how what are the uses of water. Then we have seen that what are the reasons of the water shortage, that the nowadays what happened na, that the water level is decreasing, or the fresh water is not available in that much amount which we required. In now we are having, but in some of the areas if we see, so there is the water shortage or the water scarcity. We have seen some of the reason, then we have seen some of the consequences as well. And in the last, students, what we have discussed, do you remember? That's the very important topic of this chapter. Exactly, we have discussed about the water cycle, that what is the water cycle and what are the processes involved in it. So do you remember that what is the water cycle and what are the processes involved in it? So the water cycle is what? Water cycle in which there is the circulation of the water. How? That first of all, from the evaporation to the condensation, then condensation to precipitation, precipitation to collection, and again from collection to evaporation. And that's how the whole cycle goes on. And that's how we are getting rainfall and formation of clouds. So you can see that all things are interrelated to each other, and that's how water is circulating. So this is the water cycle. Now students, today we are going to discuss some of the important topics, like other topics of this chapter. As I've already told you that we are left with some of the topics which we are going to cover up in the next session. So that's how, student, we are going to continue with the same chapter, but with the different topics. So the topics for the today's class, students, if you can see here, so it is the sources of fresh water. Like these two are the sources of water, that from where you are getting the fresh water: surface water and groundwater. Floods effect, drought and its effect, conservation of water, that how can you conserve the water, rainwater harvesting, and drip irrigation. So all of these topics we are going to cover up in this class. And see, student, they all are very simple. Why I always tell this to students, because sometimes it happens that when the students look at the list of the topics to be covered, they become so what I can say, so worried that, ma'am, today we have to cover up so much of topics. Now why, like, how we are going to cover up so much, and how I can remember all such things. So that's why it's my duty to make my students comfortable that we are going to start a new topic, but these are very simple, and it's just that if you listen very carefully, they are going to be cleared in your mind for always, I can say. Okay. So now starting with this today's session, fine. So the very first topic is the sources of fresh water, students. So if you remember that in the last session, I have told you one thing, that when we are talking about the reasons of water shortage. So I talked about this thing that yes, water on our earth is present in the very abundant amount. Like we have oceans and we have seas, but it's just that, student, the sea and the ocean water we can't use because it is salty in nature, so it could not be properly used in our household work. That is why, student, we require this fresh water, and this fresh water is used for the different ways, like from bathing, cleaning, drinking. Everything has been done with the use of this fresh water. So now we have to see that what are the sources of this fresh water. That means from where you are getting this fresh water. So students, we get the fresh water from the surface water, from surface sources, or we can say the groundwater. So these two are the sources of the fresh water, students. If you remember one thing, like the lakes, rivers, which we are having on the surface, like the land is there, and over that we are having the rivers, lakes, or any pond. So what happened, if you noticed in the water cycle, that when the rainfall is there, because rainfall is what? Rainfall is a fresh water only, that we can use that water for our work, for drinking as well. So that's why, student, when the rainfall is there, so what happened, that the water gets collected into some of the ponds, or in some of the rivers, or in some of the lakes. So that are called as the surface water. So from there, student, we are getting the fresh water source. As you can see here, that these are the rivers over the surface. That's why we are calling it as the surface water. And the second source is the groundwater. That means the water which is present like below our ground, like we are having this level of land, and below that the water which we are having, we call it as the groundwater. So groundwater is again a fresh water, student. Now you'll say, ma'am, how you are getting the groundwater? Like, so if you remember that in the last session we have talked something about the infiltration. So in the infiltration process, what was happening when the precipitation has been done, that means when the rainfall was there, so when the raindrops are coming to the ground, so through the soil, those raindrops are getting absorbed and they are traveling down to the earth. So that's how we are getting the groundwater. So these two are the sources of the fresh water, student, from where we get the fresh water, and that water actually we use in our houses for our work, like for cleaning, bathing, and for drinking also. So if I ask you one question, that why should not we use seawater? Like, why we are not using seawater for all such work? Because student, even though like we generally can't drink seawater all the time, even though the seawater is salty in nature, so that salt which is present in the water, it can what happened? It can cause some damage to your clothes, or your utensils are getting. You can see that if you start washing your utensils with the salty water, so you will see that the utensils are going to be you can say that the color is going to be change of the utensils, or you will see that there is some harm there because the salt is there. That is why we need some fresh water for all such work, and these are the sources of the fresh water. Fine, students, that means from the rivers, lakes, ground, the water which we are getting, that is the fresh water source. Now, student, okay, now we got this point that yes, we got the like we are getting the water from some of the sources like the surface source and the groundwater source. But students, what happens sometimes, like as the water is the need of each and everyone, we know this thing that the water is very precious. But sometimes, students, water can cause big disaster as well, and it could result into destruction, like totally destruction. So one of the destruction or one of the disaster which can be caused by the water is the flood is, students, that when the amount of the water, as you can see in this picture, that when a very large amount of the water flow to the some area, and due to which it results into the some kind of destruction or destruction, we can say damage, we can say. So that now that form is called as the flood. So as you can see in this picture, student, that this region is suffering through flood, and what happened that all of the houses, all of the areas is covered with the water and water only. And due to this, students, what happened, that what could be the effect of this flood, that yes, there is the destruction, there is the damage, this is one of the effect. But student, what happened, there is a loss of life, like people lost their life during the flood, because what happened when the water is flowing at a very high speed. So what happened that in that case, that people may get may get injured because of it. So there is a loss of life, you can see destruction would be there. You can see that the houses, hospital, or you can see buildings, all are getting destroyed, all are getting damaged. So there is a loss of their houses as well. That means you can say there is a economical loss as well, economical loss. Because students, when houses are getting damaged, your cars, your bikes, all are getting damaged because of the flood. So that's how what it is going to be result into it, economic loss. That means you have to, but now what happened, that when the situation is going, so yeah, we were talking about flood. So that for getting such benefits, student, we can't harm our life. Exactly. So student, you can imagine that when the flood is there, if some area is getting affected by flood, so what could be the problems they are going to face? There is loss of life, economical losses there, even though people are not getting food to survive, because the all of the where there is the water, they can't go from one place to the another place to save their life. That's how they are not getting food, they are not able to survive. So you can see that so much effect is there. So that's how, student, water is very essential. Even though water is acting, we can't imagine our life without water. But if water is changing into some kind of natural disaster, so it is going to a very worst condition for you. That if some area, or if you have ever seen like any video of the flood, so you can see that the all the houses are getting damaged. Even though all of the where is water, people can't go here, like here and there, so that they can save themselves. And even though, like, if there is the water only, people are not going. So even though, so how this like children are going to school, or people are going to their offices to do their job, so you can see that so much things are getting affected, their life is getting affected, their economical life is getting affected. You can see they, or we can say student, when such condition is there, so there is some kind of emotion also. So you can see they are getting tortured emotionally as well, and they don't know that at the very next day what is going to be happened. So that's how student flood is the condition, when you can see that the water is all over because of the raise in the level of the water. And see students, what happens generally, that when due to the water pollution, or what happened, that the global warming is there. You know this thing, that due to global warming, glaciers are melting. And when the glaciers are melting, so what happened, that the level of the rivers or the lakes are going to be rise up. And when they goes to rise up, so they just directly flow to the small rivers which are already polluted. So that's how that water is getting polluted, and that's how the level of the rivers are getting high. And such rivers which are just near to the to the residential area, or to such area where the people are living. So you can see student that if the level is going too high, so definitely it is going to cause flood. So that's how student flood is a natural disaster, we can say. And even though, like, it is turning as a destruction or the damage for the human life, not only for human, I can say, for the animals and for plants as well. And effects, we have already discussed that how much, like, how it is affecting the life of the people. Fine. Okay, so now we are going to discuss such another disaster, that is the drought. So student, drought is a condition when the land is infertile, that is the you can't grow the crop here because water is not available, or we can say that the level of the water is very less. For example, student, generally this condition in India we observe in some places of Rajasthan, that in some places of Rajasthan, student, there is no water, like not even a single drop. And it is the result when there is no rainfall from so long time. Because what happens, student, that in such areas where the water shortage is there, drought is the condition that when there is a water shortage, so after that drought, that water shortage results into the drought, because they are using the groundwater. And when the groundwater is going to be decrease, so what will be happen, student, that they are not getting the water. And even though if from the very long time there is no rainfall, so that's how student lands will become infertile in nature, and we are not able to grow the crops over there. So you can imagine that we have discussed already about the reasons of water shortage. So what happens, student, that if in village, for example, you are living in a village, and in that village you with the people, maybe there are 25,000 people, and they are using just one well. Fine. So what they use, they just use the water from the well, and that's how, if they see that the water level is decreasing, so they just dig the well more. But after some time, that when they have been digging like for so long, that by the passage of time, they are digging the well and taking out the water from the ground. So what is the result, that the water level in the groundwater is going to be decreased. And even though, like, one point will be there, that when there will be no such groundwater, and even though if such area is there, that the rainfall is not also there, so what it is going to be result, that is the drought. You can see that when there is not a single drop of water is available for you, that, or we can say, if there is a water, so it would be very less, that people have to go for a long, like they have to take a long walk or something like that, so they can collect some water for them. So as you can see, student, that in this picture, that this land is so infertile in nature, that even though they are having cracks into it, because the water is not there. Because when water is present in the soil, so soil is always having some moisture, but here there is no such water, no water droplet, that is why they are such solid and the crack is there. So that is the effect of the drought, students. So when the drought is drought, like if some area is affected by drought, so what happens, student, that in that area people are not able to grow the crops. If the land is infertile, so they are not getting proper food, their survival has become like you cannot even imagine that how the people are suffering, or how they can survive their life if there is no water. Animals are not there. Plants, you can't grow plants because water is not there. You can see that this children he is just sitting so sad because there is no such water. So you can imagine that what could be the effects of it. that there could be a difficulty in survival. Water problem is the main reason, we can say, for the drinking as well. For the drinking water is not there, so how the people are going to survive their life? Exactly. And so many things, that when the people are not good by their health, so how they are going to work? Okay. And the infertility is there, so they are not like for there is no crop, or we can say that no agriculture can take place. So these all are the effects of the droughts, which indirectly or directly is just, you can say, it results into the, I can say, just the thing that if drought is there, so it indirectly hurt the emotion of people. How? Because student, if you are not getting water, so at one point what will happen, you will become weak emotionally, because what the thing that water is something which keeps you fit, and you require water. What happens, student, that it for the 3-4 days, if we are not getting food, even then we can survive, but for the 3-4 days, if we are not getting water in a proper amount, so student, it will result into the malnutrition in the in the children, or we can say that it results into the weakness in the people. So that's how, student, we can imagine if such condition is there, so how we are going to survive our life. Exactly. And it would results into everything, like people is going to be weak in each and every condition, economically, mentally, physically, emotionally, so everything is going to be fail at that point. So student, that's the point where you can see. So as we can see that when the large amount of water is there, so it is also very, you can say, loss of life is there. So it is also not good. And if you compare this flood with the drought, when there is no single drop of water, so that means it is also causing a loss of life only, because if the people, animal or plants are not getting water, so we can't survive. So it just indirectly result into the what, that the loss of life. So that's how, student, flood and droughts both are the disaster, you can say that not good for us. So they are having very negative impact or negative effects over the human life, or we can say to the living beings life, not only for only human beings. Why generally we talk about human beings? That because human beings are having more role in the life, like they have to earn money, they have to do so much. So that's a, student, what happened, that indirectly we talk about the human beings, but because of the floods and droughts, is not only the life of human beings are getting affected, but the same thing is happening with the animals and the plants as well. So as we have seen that such what I can say, cruel nature of water, that how the water is so wise to us, that or nice to us, that we drink water and we get everything, energy, and so many functions are there. But when the water is converting into the another form, like in the flood or drought, so you can see that what will be there, that the worst conditions, I can say. Exactly. Okay, so now the next topic is the conservation of water. That means we should start conserving water, or we can say that we should start saving water, because we know this thing, when the fresh water level of the fresh water is less, and if we just continue like this, like we are consuming water without any requirement or more than the requirement, so what happened, that the water is getting wasted, and when the waste water is there, so we can't conserve water, we can't save it, and that's how the results will be what, as we have discussed all of the consequences. People are not getting water, our life is getting affected, we can't survive without it. So there is a need to conserve the water. And how can we conserve water? So we are having so many steps. It's just that just use, like, water management should be there. Water management, like if you see that any tap is on, and the water is flowing through it, so what you can do, you just take one second, like hardly it will take 1 second or 2 seconds to turn off it, so that the water will not get wasted. So water management is the very big thing which you can do. Stop water pollution. Stop water pollution. That means, student, if you ever see that if someone, or if because of you only, that the waste is getting dissolved, or you can say that the waste is throwing into the water in such river or lake or pond, you should take some step, and you should create awareness that we should do, like we should not do it. Fine. And even though, like if you're using one bucket I can say water. So it's just that use wisely. That if you think that in the half bucket your work is going to be complete nicely, so just use this thing. For example, student, that generally what happened, I have seen this thing that whenever we wash the clothes, so we are having water. So that water we can use for washing our bikes, cars, and anything, because that water is not that much dirty. I'm not talking about to take some sewage water. That is the different thing, very different thing. I'm talking about like if you have to wash your cars, and so you can use that water. And then what the thing is that you just required only one clean water, one bucket of clean water, so you can overall clean your transport. So that's how, student, we can conserve water. But for the conservation of water, we have two major things in your syllabus. So first is the rainwater harvesting, that the rainwater which we are getting, so we can harvest that rainwater. That means saving of rainwater. Save rainwater. Because students, what happened that during the precipitation, that means when the clouds getting burst out and the water is falling over the ground, so what happened when we are not having proper management, so water directly flows into the sewers, and when it directly flows to the sewers, so eventually, student, it mixed up with the polluted water and it gets them, you can say that it gets contaminated. So student, it is very important to save rainwater. How? As you can see here that this is the house, and over the roof of this house water droplets are falling, and these water droplets are collecting into this, you can say that any kind of tank, and this pipe is attached to it, and the water is getting collected into a big tank. And the water which is present in this big tank, now you can directly use it, because students, rainwater is fresh water, that it is also a source of fresh water. So that's a student, when the rainwater is there, you should save it. How? It depends upon the condition, whether you have to collect in such a way or whether you have to store in underground tanks. So it depends upon to you exactly. But it's just that if you start harvesting rainwater, so definitely you are having more amount of fresh water. And as you can see that one way is here, that the roof, or at the top of the roof, you can connect that roof with some tank, and then tank you can connect with the pipe, and that pipe is connected with a big tank. And you can see that here is one tap, so that if you want that rainwater to use in your house, you can just turn on it and you can get the rainwater. So, and see students, yes, I know this thing that the rainwater having some impurities, so it's like that you can use some purities, like purification process also. When you are getting rainwater, you can boil it and then you can use it. So eventually what happened, that the impurities will get removed from it. So that's how rainwater harvesting is a good step for the conservation of water, because when the rainfall is there, so you can say that the most of the rainwater flows into the sewer and we can't use it. But if we start using the rainwater harvesting, so you are having more fresh water. Okay, now you'll say, ma'am, okay, the roof of, so rainwater harvesting we are talking about. So it depends upon you that how you want to do it. So because it's a good step to do. Fine, students. Okay, just give me a minute. So this is the rainwater harvesting. Now second is the drip irrigation. Irrigation, first of all, you should know what is the irrigation. Students, what happened when in the agriculture field or when we are growing some crops, so we need water for growing crop, and the supply of water for the agriculture, for agriculture purpose, like supply of water for agriculture purpose, we call it as the irrigation. So what happens, student, that some of the people start using tube wells, or this much, like the pipe are so thick that they start using such pipes, or even though they just, so due to which what happens, student, that lots of water is getting wasted. So what you can do is you can use the drip irrigation. As you can see here, the students, that these are the pipes. Exactly. And in these pipes, you can see that there are small holes. Small holes are there and water is flowing through it. And when the water is flowing through it, so the water is coming out through the pipe in the form of the drip only, drop only. So that's a student, that when water is when the water is falling drop wise drop, so the lots of water is not getting wasted, and the land is also getting the proper amount of the water, because you can see that the drops are here, then it is at the some distance, you can see that the another hole is there. So that's a student, by using the drip irrigation process, so you can conserve or you can save water not to be get wasted. Like if you start using tube wells, because what happened in the tube well, students, you can see that this much thick is the pipe. So if the water is coming out of it, so what happened that lots of water is there and maybe the wastage of the water is possible. So that's a student to conserve the water in the agriculture field. The people start using the drip irrigation, that they use the water pipes and they are having small holes into it, and through that when the pipe that when the water flows through it, so the water starts falling drop by drops, and the holes are not that you can see that only 2 or 3 holes will. So you can use such different methods, students. Like if you want to use, as we can see here, that drip irrigation is one of them. And see, for the conservation of water, it's just that you don't have to think, you just have to follow such important steps, or the small steps, so that you can save water. So that's our student. We have completed all of the topics of this session also, and with that your chapter is also completed, and we have studied so nice things in this chapter. Exactly, like interesting things, I can say, not nice but interesting things, like how you can save rainwater or conserve the rainwater, how can you stop wasting water in the agriculture field. So drip irrigation is the important, like a nice technique to be done. So that's our student, we can conserve the water, and with that student we have completed this chapter. Now what you have to do is you have to study this chapter carefully and watch the videos carefully. If you face any problem, any question comes to your mind or any query, so what you can do, that you can write your question on the public or the private forum of the Ask IITians, and you will get your answer from expert side, and that's how you are going to complete your chapter. And in the last, student, I just like to say thank you for watching the video with a great attention, and keep learning from Ask IITians. Thank you.